Hello, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown, and today is going to be the murder of Cleopatra, part 7, the murder of Antony. Quite a surprise when I say the murder of Antony because, well, people think he committed suicide just like Cleopatra supposedly committed suicide. There's a lot of suicide going on here. No, there actually isn't. Neither one of them committed suicide. And I'm going to bring you the evidence today to show you how that works. All right, so where did we leave off last time? To catch up, we had, Cleopatra tried to escape Egypt. She had tried to get her ships across to the Red Sea. That failed. Then she opened up the Ptolemaic Canal, got it unsilted, but she had to wait for the Nile inundations, and Octavian had to show up too early so that she could not get her ships through the canal. So she's stuck in Alexandria. All right, there she is. She's stuck there. Antony is there. They've got their navy. They've got Antony's navy and Cleopatra's navy. And they've also got his troops, his army. But they know pretty well that Octavian has way more manpower and ship power than they do. So, but they're pretty much stuck. So let me just show you again what I believe she was planning to do. All right. So let's go to where she was sitting in Egypt. All right. So she is here in Alexandria. Now, Octavian came all the way around the Mediterranean here, came in from Rome, and then he comes down. Pelusium pretty much just fell, so he just took over that. Then he came down here and up here to Alexandria. Now, what Cleopatra wants to do, since she didn't have a chance to do it before, is if he can get here to Alexandria, when he gets here, he's going to get there. Octavian's arrived. She is hoping, the one last hope she has is during the time that Octavian took to get to Alexandria, now the Nile has risen. She can now go to this location and she can go out the canal and down. She can do it, only she's over here. And how does she do that when her ships are stuck here? So the plan is, I call it Actium 2, that when the battle starts between Octavian's navy and Antony's navy, they're going to be battling out here, and she is going to be in the harbor with her ships. And as soon as they get far enough up here so she can just get out behind the lines, she will go out from Alexandria behind the lines, go here, or possibly here. We don't know, because we don't know exactly what the situation of the actual Nile River and its tributaries were at the time. But she is then can go down here. It won't take her that long, 5 days at the most. And she's got a head start. The ships at the back, should Octavian follow, could fight, letting the ships go forward, and then she could get out. So where is she waiting, you ask? Okay, she is sitting here. All right, this is Alexandria. Now she's in this harbor area. All right, she's waiting here. This is where her ships are. She's waiting for the moment when her ships can go right out here and down the Nile. She's waiting in a building such as this. This is actually Dendara, which is not where it's not located in Alexandria. It's further south. But I'm just showing you a building. And this is going to be important. What building is she waiting in? Now, what Plutarch and most of the historians will have you believe is she was here in Alexandria, hidden in her tomb, which is quite funny. I'm going to explain why she's not in a tomb. That absolutely is not true. She's in a temple, and a temple more like Dendara, because, first of all, this is just not where tombs are built, and they're not built in this way. And there's going to be a good explanation of why she's actually in a temple. But before I go there, I want to tell you the story that you saw on Netflix. All right, you did. You saw it in Netflix. Yeah, because you can't help it. Yeah, they didn't do the murder of Antony. No. They did the sad story that has been told for 2,000 years by most historians, and it comes from the usual writings of Plutarch, who is, of course, my not so favorite writer about Cleopatra. But he tells this story, the craziest story you will ever hear. Well, maybe you've heard some other crazy stories, but in this scenario, I think this is the craziest part of all. And I keep wondering, why is nobody thinking about how nuts this story is? All right, let me read you what Netflix showed you. And I can't blame Netflix on this. Okay. The whole series was pretty bad, the Queen Cleopatra series. But can I blame them for following what all the historians have said and what Plutarch has said? And no, I can't blame them because they're following what has been out there. All right, I'm going to read you what has happened. So here we have Cleopatra. The claim is Cleopatra is hiding in her tomb. Okay, she's already threatened Octavian. I'm going to burn up. I have all the treasures in here, and I'm going to burn them all up. Of course, she's in a tomb, which has no air, and I don't know how she's getting all the wood in there, but all right. And of course, the most important thing is not so much that she probably couldn't burn up stuff in a tomb anyway, but that she knows Octavian isn't paying attention to anything she would say. So all these messages she's supposedly sending to Octavian going, oh, I'll do this if you'll be nice to me. She's not an idiot. She knows what kind of hurt person Octavian is. And she knows anything she says to him, no matter what he answers, is going to be a lie. Oh, I will take you into consideration. If you get Antony killed off, I will be nice to you. She knows it's not true. She knows she's a dead duck as soon as Octavian gets a hold of her. She knows this. She's a smart woman. So she's supposedly hiding. She's hidden in her tomb. I'll get to that in a minute. And locked up the tomb. Oh, wait, maybe I should start there. She locks the tomb from the inside. So I have not heard stories that when they made tombs in those days, that they made some poor schmuck go in there after the dead person was buried and then close the tomb and die with them. Usually the tombs of those days, what happened was they put the person in the tomb and then they covered up the entrance of the tomb with like dirt or whatever. They didn't lock it from the inside. So this is already suspicious. But anyway, she is hiding in her tomb, waiting for whatever's to go down is going to go down. So now, here's what Plutarch says. All right. This is my book. Again, let me point this out. This is my book, The Murder of Cleopatra. It is linked in the description below. You can buy it on Amazon. And I always want to point this out. I have a lot of information in this book. And I have a long bibliography and a lot of footnotes. I support everything I say in this book with evidence. Now, someone can always disagree with my analysis of the evidence. I'm okay with that, but at least I support it with information and evidence. And I did a tremendous amount of research, so it's in here. And this series is not going to be in the depth that you're going to find in the book. So if you're really, really interested, go to the book. Okay, what did Plutarch say? Okay. Oh, Lord. All right, so wait a minute. Hold on. I've got to turn the page here. Okay. So essentially, she's hiding away. Okay. She's in her tomb. And Antony is out with his army, his troops. And his troops are going to go fight Octavian's troops. And meanwhile, he's got his navy in the harbor to fight Octavian's navy. That's the big deal for Cleopatra, right? She really doesn't care too much about what happens to her husband, Antony, if he gets killed in battle with his troops. Not so important. What she needs is the navy Antony's navy, to go forward and start the fight, the battle with Octavian's navy so that she can sneak out with her ships. This is the most important thing. Unfortunately, I've heard that's not what happens. Let me read Plutarch. Some of this has some accuracy, in my opinion. Some of it is just nonsense, which is what I'm going to point out. At daybreak, Antony in person posted his infantry on the hills in front of the city and watched his ships as they put out and attacked those of the enemy. Okay, so there was theoretically a start there. and he expected to see something great accomplished by them, and he remained quiet. But the crews of his ships, as soon as they were near, saluted Caesar's crews, that's Octavian, his crews, with their oars. They put their oars up. And on their returning, the salute changed sides, and so all the ships, now united into one fleet, sailed toward the city, prows on. So, there is going to be no battle. Okay, they surrendered. The Navy surrendered. So supposedly Antony's up on this hill. There's a special hill in Alexandria you can look down on from, and he's like, oh crap. He sees that the Navy has surrendered. A lot of this is because they knew it was hopeless. So they're like, we're done. So they surrendered, and all the ships come in, and that's where Cleopatra knows she's done, because she cannot get her ships out of the harbor. She cannot leave Egypt. She's stuck. That's happening there. Now let's go on. No sooner had Antony seen this than he was deserted by his cavalry. Okay, this makes sense too, because the cavalry's like, we're really not into going forward with any kind of fighting at this point, because clearly the Navy's done. Everything's against us. So no sooner had he seen this, he was deserted by the cavalry, which went over to the enemy. So now they've gone over to Octavian too. So they've surrendered. And this makes sense. So far, Plutarch, the machinations of war are making sense here. And after being defeated with his infantry, he retired into the city, crying out that he had been betrayed by Cleopatra. Yeah, Plutarch does not like Cleopatra, and he's writing for the Romans, so he wants them not to like her. With whom he waged war for her sake. Well, that's kind of true. But fearing his anger and his madness, fled for refuge into her tomb and let fall the drop doors, again, closing from the inside, which is not a tomb, which were made strong with bolts and bars. The doors of certain buildings were very strong. They had very strong bolts and bars, but they were on the outside. No, if you were going to pin people in, but if they were on the inside, that was because they weren't tombs. They were temples, and the priests were on the inside, and they could bar the public from coming in, have the privacy, and then they could unbolt and let people out. Okay, so, and then she sent messengers to tell Antony that she was dead. Okay, this quite amuses me. So in this was in Netflix. So supposedly she rolls up some papyrus or something and says, and then Cleopatra killed herself, and sends it over to Antony, who goes, oh no, my lover has killed herself. Okay, now at this point, if he thinks she betrayed him, I don't know that he would care, but all right. So supposedly, for reasons completely unknown, she sends over this thing that says she's killed herself. Now, one could say that she again was trying to get the favor of Octavian. She was trying to get Antonina to commit suicide, and therefore she'd say to Octavian, hey, I got him to kill himself, so be nice. She's not doing that. So anyway, then Antony believed the message because, of course, he's supposedly a total dolt. All right. And said to himself, why dost thou longer delay, Antony? Fortune has taken away the sole remaining excuse for clinging to life. So he went into his chamber, and he unfastened his breastplate and laid it aside, and he said, O Cleopatra, I am not grieved to be bereft of thee, for I shall straightway join thee. But I am grieved that such an imperator as I am has been found to be inferior to a woman of courage. Now Plutarch's just insulting the crap out of Antony. He's a whip. He took off his breastplate and he's like, you've already killed yourself. I don't know how I'm going to do it. So he takes out the breastplate. Now, Antony had a trusty slave named Eros. Him, Antony had long before engaged in a case of need to kill him, and now demanded the fulfillment of his promise. So Eros drew his sword and held it up as though he would smite his master. But then he turned his face away and slew himself. And as he fell at his master's feet, Antony said, well done, Eros. Though thou wast not able to do it thyself, thou teachest me what I must do. So And then it says, and running himself through the belly, he dropped upon the couch. But the wound didn't bring a speedy death. Therefore, as the blood ceased flowing as he lay down, he came to himself and besought the bystanders to give him the finishing stroke. But they fled from the chamber, and he lay writhing and crying out until Diomedes, the secretary, came from Cleopatra with orders to bring him to her in the tomb. Okay. First of all, how did she know he didn't actually finish killing himself off? But anyway, now, I kind of want to stop here to say something very important, because did he actually stab himself? All right. Because this is claimed that the reason, that in failure in war, that a Roman would kill himself. And for Cleopatra, they say, oh, because she knew she would be paraded in the triumph in Rome by Octavian, she would kill herself so she wouldn't have to go through that humiliation. I think they overplay that. I don't believe for a minute that Antony killed himself. Why is this? Because later on it says this, and I'll get back to him going to Cleopatra in the supposed tomb. Scarcely was he dead when, okay, I wish I could pronounce the names, Proculius. I'm going to say it that way, and somebody will say that was wrong. Proculius came from Caesar. For after Antony had smitten himself, and while he was being carried to Cleopatra, and here's another name I can't pronounce, Dercetius, one of his bodyguard seized Antony's sword, concealed it, and stole away with it. And running to Caesar, he was the first to tell him of Antony's death and showed him the sword all smeared with blood. All right, I'm going to say right there, Antony didn't kill himself. What happened? The reason the guy took his sword with blood and took it to Octavian was to say, we have killed Antony, we are surrendering. There's a reason for that. Otherwise, it serves not so much purpose. But they're on this hill. They see that the navy has surrendered. They're doomed. And if Antony's saying, hey, let's go forward and fight, they're like, dude, you're crazy. And they kill Antony because they know it's hopeless anyway, and they're not going to go down with Antony. Killing Antony and taking the sword to Octavian to say, we surrender, we have killed Antony, then they're in his good graces. So I believe that's the proof that he was murdered much more than he killed himself, because Cleopatra said she killed herself and sent him a note. Oh, Lord. I mean, the nonsense of this. Okay. The likelihood that he was killed by his own men is far greater. Now, was he dead at the time? All right. Not necessarily, but very well may be. He was brought to where Cleopatra was. All right. So let's go back to, here she is in the harbor. She's here awaiting whatever's going to happen, supposedly in a tomb. And Antony is brought to here. Now, there's a couple possibilities. Let me find my spot where I said the couple possibilities were. All right. There's a couple here we go. Okay, if Antony was not murdered outside the door of the temple, in other words, we don't know where Antony was murdered. Was he murdered on the hill? Was he going to Cleopatra? We don't know. But he was likely brought to Cleopatra to let her know the battle and her plan to escape was over and finished. So in other words, if they killed Antony, they'd surrendered, they just bring his body over to her to say it's done. Stop. There's no fight left. We're done. So if so, Antony's men might have felt some remorse over killing their leader and thought it would be at least right to bring him to the queen. On the other hand, perhaps they disliked the queen enough to wish to dump Antony's body at her door to let her know that they held her responsible for his demise. So we don't know which one that was. He was brought. We do not know if he was brought alive or he was brought dead. Okay. In the story from Plutarch, he's brought alive. Okay. Now, let me tell you the next part of the story of Plutarch, because this is where I start. Oh, I don't know. It's just it's just so funny. It really is. When we look at in Netflix, this is Antony still alive, being brought up by Cleo herself and her handmaidens into the supposed tomb to die in her arms. It's more romantic that way, isn't it? All right. So let's see exactly what Plutarch says. All right. All right. So hold on a second. Let me find it. Okay. Here we go. Having learned that Cleopatra was alive, Antony eagerly ordered his servants to raise him up, and he was carried in their arms to the doors of her tomb. Cleopatra, however, would not open the doors, but showed herself at a window from which she let down ropes and cords. To these Antony was fastened, and she drew him up herself with the aid of the two women whom alone she had admitted with her into the tomb. Those are the handmaidens. Never, as those who were present tell us, was there a more piteous sight. Wait a minute. How did anybody tell anybody anything? They're all dead. I mean, Cleopatra and the handmaidens all died. How can anybody say how piteous the sight was when they were the only ones in the supposed tomb? I never even saw that before. That's pretty funny. Smeared with blood and struggling with death, he was drawn up, stretching out his hands. Oh, Cleo. To her, even as he dangled in the air. For the task was not an easy one for the women, and scarcely could Cleopatra, with clinging hands and strained face, pull up the rope, while those below called out encouragement to her and shared in her agony. Pull harder, pull harder. And when she had thus got him in and laid him down, she rent her garments over him and tore her breast with her hands, wiped off some of his blood upon her face, and called him master, husband, imperator. Indeed, she almost forgot her own ills in her pity for his. But Antony stopped her lamentations and asked for a drink of wine, either because he was thirsty or in a hope of a speedier release. When he had drunk, he advised her to consult her own safety, and so on and forth, and he dies. Literally one of the dumbest stories I've ever heard. All right. He's brought to the, quote, tomb. All right, here's the problem about the tomb. Let me go with the tomb first. This is what a tomb looks like in Egypt. You see this? You walk, it's like it's under a mound of dirt, or if there is a building above, the building above does not have the tomb in it. You go down these stairs into the darkness, very darkness. This, I think this is, geez, now I forgot his name. What's his name's tomb? The famous one. Whatever his name is. King Tut. Yeah. Tut. I forgot the kid's name. Okay, he was a kid. Anyway, there he is. It's a little room. It's like a box. It doesn't have windows in it. You see any windows here? You see any windows here? You don't see windows. Watch when you go in. See this guy going into a tomb? Yeah, he's ducking into the tomb. If you examine all of the tombs of Egypt and even Greece, the Grecian tombs, they were all underground. And if they were above ground, they were a lump, they might have been a building. They might have been a bunch of dirt, but there were no windows. They were dark inside. You had to have a torch to go into the suckers. And when they finished burying the person with all the things they needed to go into the afterlife, then they basically backed on out and closed the place down because no one was going in there again, especially because they didn't want grave robbers going in there and all that. So this is not a building. This is, how does she have a window to throw ropes out of down to Antony? If she's in a tomb, she's not in a tomb. She's absolutely not in a tomb. So the question is, what is she actually in? All right, let's take a look at what she's actually in. Something like this is Dendara. I've been there. And this is a fairly small temple. Okay. It's a temple. This is where the priest is. This is where people go inside. It's beautiful inside. Absolutely gorgeous. But take a look at what you see here. You see the little door? Yeah. The door is locked. If you can lock it, whatever way you lock it from the inside, lock it from the outside, but you can lock the door. And in this particular temple, you'll see there's no windows here, but you will see that you could theoretically, well, this will be the closest place you could throw a rope down, although I think there's no way to get up there. But there are, if I take a look at some others, here we have, when you're coming into this is Karnak, you can see windows up here. Now, this is like the gates, and it's very hard to imagine what it looked like at the time because most of it is not in existence anymore. Very few ruins, but you can see how high those windows are. If you're up there in the windows and you're throwing your rope down, first of all, I'm going to say this. Cleopatra was 39 years old. Her handmaiden, who were probably with her from a very young age, they may have been easily 60 years old. And they used combs to help her comb her hair. And maybe they braided her hair. And maybe they washed her body with a little sponge. These women do not have arms of steel. There is no way on God's earth they're throwing out a rope, or in the show, I think they showed like some kind of curtains. I don't know what you're doing with curtains in the tomb either. Where did they get this stuff in a tomb? They're throwing that out and they're tying it to poor old Antony down at the bottom, right? And then they're going to haul him up the wall here. And the guy's dying. And they're like, even if they could do it, they're hauling him up the wall. And he's like whacking his head on the wall and he's scraping himself. I mean, what a mean thing to do. Why the heck are you bringing him up there? And why do I say that? Why do I say that? All right. What do we see over here? Oh, yeah, a thing. It's called a door. Okay. It's a door. Before I go into the door, just the whole issue about the door, I just want to point out what I did think she built here. It was called the Caesareum, and there is actually, historically, there is evidence that the Caesareum existed. It was a beautiful temple, absolutely beautiful temple. The description of the Caesareum was, and it doesn't exist anymore, but let me show you some thoughts. Something it could be like this, these beautiful big temples with all kinds of stuff for, statues and things like that. Very, very beautiful, big temples. And it was said here, it stands situate against a most commodious harbor. That's the harbor I just showed you. All right. The harbor that she's waiting in. Wonderfully high and large in proportion, and an eminent sea mark full of choice paintings and statues, with donatives and oblations in abundance, and beautiful all over with gold and silver, curious and regular in the disposition of the parts, with galleries, libraries, porches, courts, halls, walks, groves, as glorious as expensive art could make them, the hope and comfort of seafaring men coming in and going out. So right where I showed you, right here is where it is believed the Caesareum was built. She built it, Cleopatra, but she didn't finish it. It was finished by Octavian. So it was like, when did he finish that? Well, after she died, he finished it, and then eventually it disappeared. But we're talking about one heck of a gorgeous building. We're not talking about a tomb. Let's look again. It's not a tomb. Okay, she's in a very, very fancy building, or at least what was, she may not have been finished building it, but she was in a temple. And there's a lot of discussion about Cleopatra in her last days and how she was, there was a bed and there's this and there's that. And it's like, in a grave? I mean, in a tomb? No. In a temple? Yes. All right. So she's in the temple right by the sea, ready to go away, doesn't get out. They bring Antony to that location. And the reason I wanted to show you the door was this. This is one of the funniest things ever. So let's look again at, here we are. She's hauling him up the side of a building, torturing the poor man, if he's not already dead, all the way up the side of the building. Why? Octavian was not inside. He was not there at that location. He was outside of Alexandria fighting he had his troops out there. They weren't in town yet. The troops that were in town were Cleopatra's troops. Her people, her army, her guards were all around this temple sitting there on the harbor. She had her people. So my question is this. For God's sakes, if your husband is dying and in pain, why don't you open the door? Remember how Plutarch said she had bolted the door from the inside? Well, that means she can unbolt the door from the inside and let the poor man in. She's got no reason to be hauling him up the side of a building. Just open the door. This is one of the craziest stories I've ever heard. And yet it's being told over and over and over again how, yes, she and the two little handmaidens, those three ladies who have apparently been working out at a gym, are able to haul a 200-pound body, because he's not even helping, haul him up an entire side of a building. And they're doing that when all they had to do was open the door. So that's the craziness. So at this point in time, she brings Antony in, theoretically, and he dies in her arms, or he's already dead. We don't know which one, but he's dead. All right. And now she is here in some temple of some sort, right there at the harbor. And Octavian is coming her way. At this point, she does lock herself in. Well, what else are you going to do? So she locks herself in, hoping, well, I don't know what she's hoping at that point. She's just going to do what she can do to stave off him, getting to her. But she knows she doesn't have much time. He is going to arrive. He's going to get in there, and he's going to capture her. And so the next part, part 8, will be about the capture of Cleopatra, and how she was held in captivity, and why she was held in captivity, and why she was tortured in captivity, and how that has been rewritten by Plutarch as well, in a way that just, again, makes very little sense. But there's a reason Octavian keeps her in captivity for a period of time. And a lot of people would say, well, that's because he's planning to take her back to Rome, and he's going to parade her in the triumph, and he's going to say, looky, looky. No, that's not the reason. But you'll find out in part 8. So I do hope you'll join me for that. And if you're new to the channel, please do like and subscribe, and check out my playlist for things that are not so historical. Many, many cases that I analyze. And I will be back with part 8, and I hope you enjoy that too. Bye.